There's a lot of snow up here.
Looks to be a cinnamon phase black bear. He's going up the tree.
All right, everybody, welcome back to episode 4 of Beyond the Barrier, a Barrier Outdoors podcast. We got some great things on the docket here to talk about today, but first we're just going to start off with what we've been up to lately. So it's officially March here in Pennsylvania. Well, it's officially March everywhere, but that means turkey season's just a couple months out here in Pennsylvania. So I've been getting fired up, getting excited. I actually just ordered a new turkey gun online. It should be in this week. I'm going with the 410 this year. It's something I've been reading about a little bit online. Some guys like the challenge, but with the science behind the new TSS shots and stuff like that, it should be able to perform just as good as a 10 or a 20 gauge or a 12 gauge.
So for somebody like me, where does that fall in the calibers of like 20, 12, and then
the bottom?
410.
410's the smallest shotgun.
Smallest. Okay.
Yeah.
So what would be a bigger one than 12 gauge?
Bigger than 12 would be 10.
10, okay.
Yeah, so it goes 410, 28, 16, 12, 10.
That single shot shotgun that I inherited is a 10 gauge.
Yeah. Yeah, so I got the smallest and you got the biggest.
Take that thing out. Spray painted camo shotgun.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see how it performs. I've been doing a lot of research on chokes and shells and stuff like that. So keep an eye out for some videos behind that. We're going to be doing a lot of testing to get the best performance out of this gun. So that should be exciting.
What was your reasoning for that, caliber?
Just because I can, because it's fun.
Okay, just something different.
I've been seeing a lot. I've been reading a lot about it, and it only weighs 3 pounds, so it'll be super nice to carry around in the woods, and it'll be fun to just see what I can get performance wise out of such a small shell.
It sort of makes sense though, because you don't need a 12 gauge to shoot like a turkey.
Yeah, the performance won't, of course, be as great as a 12 gauge because it's a smaller shell, but
the goal is to get those turkeys on you anyways. Yeah. So if you're not shooting them 50 yards out, then you should be fine.
It'd be similar to like archery in deer hunting. Like you're just trying to get them a little closer. You're putting a self-imposed limit on yourself, stuff like that. So it should be fun to see what that's got.
Speaking about turkeys, me and my wife were driving the other day and we saw what I say, 65 or 70?
Yeah.
Yes, probably closer to 70. I counted with, my own eyes, 62, 65 turkeys, and then there's a few that we missed. So in one big flock.
That's crazy.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And then this morning, my brother texted me and said there was a nice beard dragger pretty close to my property. It was on my parents' property, but pretty close to the property that I have as well, on my sister's driveway, basically. So there's, I've seen those riding around on my side-by-side. I've seen those 3 or 4 there, just like a bachelor group. I don't know if that's a thing with turkeys.
So this time of year, they'll all be together, and then come breeding season, they'll
sort of break up
apart
a little bit.
Yeah.
Then they must be starting a little bit, because it was only those. It was definitely a bachelor group, all, Jakes and Toms. Otherwise, I'm sure there's turkeys that I'm missing on the farm that I don't see as often, but I have seen those. We've been seeing them out in the fields more often. My wife was like, "Where do they go in the winter?" And I'm like, "In the woods, I don't know,
somewhere,
up in a tree." Well, yeah. Anyways, we're both really excited for that. I need to start practicing calling more for that personally, but and then moving into the next couple weeks here, I plan on maybe this week doing my master plan for the deer plots and stuff on my property. So be looking out for that on YouTube, and then I'm sure we'll do a more deep dive on a podcast. So looking forward to doing that this spring, doing a lot of research along the lines of different plant species and stuff like that, really hitting it hard, learning a lot, learning about shrubbery. And I've been taking a book with me about trees out on the side-by-side ride with Kelsey and and Josephine, my daughter. So I've been taking this book with me so I could identify the trees better. That's one skill that I lack at.
Yeah.
And with that book, it was really cool because, I could go look at the tree, confirm its identity, and then in the book it went into detail about different animal species, which I thought was great because that's exactly what I was looking for, but I thought it was just a book about trees. Like it actually dove into the wildlife aspect, which is really cool. So that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, that was my dad's favorite thing to do when we would go for walks when we were younger. We'd walk around and he'd be like, all right, and put his hand on it. What's this tree? All right, what's this tree?
Yeah,
every single time without fail. Yeah,
I wish.
Yeah, so it's fun.
My dad was good at cutting them down.
Yeah, and other than that, Keegan and I have been shooting an archery league every week, getting a little better, getting some practice in the winter when we normally wouldn't.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Like, highly recommend doing some sort of league because I'm definitely getting so much better.
Absolutely.
Like, I think it's 12 weeks long, right? And we're 8 weeks in. And every week I've been, I think some people take it real seriously. Or at least I don't. And I've been changing things up like every single week, changing my grip or I wouldn't say changing, doing better technique, a better grip technique, focusing more on like where I feel comfortable with my anchor. Cause like I would just shoot, like obviously I would have like fundamentals, like I know I have to anchor, but now I'm like trying to customize and fine tune and be like 100%. I want my anchor here every time. And like just what feels natural, and like I've been focusing on like my in between my knuckles on my jaw, which knuckle do I feel more comfortable with, like literally down to that. And then recently this last week I shot with both eyes open, which I thought I wouldn't like, but it's sort of growing on me, which is cool because I would sort of like to do that with like rifles too. I don't know, I just grew up and nobody really told you what or what not to do, but half the time you're squinting super hard to shoot out a rifle. And honestly, after opening both my eyes shooting archery, I felt like I have a better, like a clear, I think it's that depth. You can't have, if you don't have both eyes open, you don't have depth perception. So by having both eyes open, I feel like better, it's a clearer picture. And then obviously it works really great for hunting because you could have a better idea of what's going on around you. So if you're focused in on a buck and you're like following that buck, you could also have the other eye open and see that maybe a doe or maybe even a bigger buck is coming out and stuff like that.
It's great for your
peripheral
situational awareness.
Yeah, for sure. And especially with us going on an elk hunt this fall, like I was honestly thinking it's probably really similar if you were to try and hunt a cow, like a cow,
a moo cow,
like a cattle. I'm like, because I grew up on a cattle farm, so I'm like, I know cows really, really well, like the herd mentality. Especially when we're trying to push them a certain way or, so I think that like plays hand in hand with, elk because they're in these huge groups. So so I've been like thinking like, what would it be like if I was hunting a cattle? Like, so like that whole mindset they have, that group mentality is really different because like, deer have it, but they're in like a group of 5 where we have like 40 cows. So if I wanted to go lasso a cow, like one cow specifically without getting the herd riled up, like it's almost similar to hunting like elk almost. So tangent there, but we're going to hunt cows. Yeah, buddy.
All right. So what we got on the docket for you guys today is we're going to be talking about hunting media. You hear that kind of as a buzz term, a buzzword a little bit, and it can either have a really great...
Content creator is the buzzword.
Yeah. It can either have a really great... Connotation, that's the word to it, or like a really negative one. And so we just wanted to talk about like how we've seen hunting media change in our lifetimes, and at the end we'll discuss if it's changing for the better or if the good old days were before we started.
Yeah, that would suck, but we'll figure that out here. But this is something I really, really wanted to get into. When we, decide to do certain podcasts, we have like a list of different ideas, and this is one that I thought would be really, really fun. So Let's sort of jump into where the foundations of media began, and I think
I'll let you take this one because there's a lot of history going on.
Yeah, I hit it pretty hard this morning. So I think it all starts back in that hunter-gatherer thing thousands of years ago, obviously, where it's word of mouth, and think like maybe Native Americans, where you were destined to kill this big spirit bear type of thing. I think that's where it all started out, but I don't think we have to get into that, but I think it really started moving in the early American days of the frontier. So the only forms of media back then were writing or going to museums or these fancy events or something like that, until photography and videography really came out. So the first beginner media giants, you could say, were frontiersmen like Davy Crockett, which most people could put that name to, or Daniel Boone, or the Long Hunters, which if you're following Meat Eater, they just did a book on. I've started it, but have not finished it yet. So, that was sort of the beginning of the American media renaissance. I feel like when I think of the earliest forms of, famous, I guess you would say, hunters, it would probably start somewhere around then. And then I feel like there was that transition between the Wild West. I think, the frontiers are happening in the early 1800s, and then you're rolling into the end of the Wild West was around the 1880s, 1890s, were when, cowboys were starting to be non-existent. It was a changing way of life. So back before then, there was a lot of people hunting, like the long hunters and pelt hunters and stuff like that. And it was more about making a living, but there were those actors that were starting to turn it into a, what would you say, like a show, or trying to gain success through media, which was, written or shows back then, or, TV shows. So, or, not TV shows, actual show events, like a circus or something like that.
I would have to say that there's not a whole lot I'd be willing to give up about modern times, but being able to go back to the media of the rendezvous of the mountain men when they would all come down and get together in the winter, and just to be there and hear some of those stories would be insane.
That'd be crazy.
Where they would all get into big camps. And
think of the amount of stories that are better than every single story that was written down, like the ones that were not written down. The wild, the animals back then were probably huge. They were probably nuts. But anyways, going on to I think a more skewed idea of the Wild West started with maybe not to hit on Annie Oakley or Buffalo Bill, but these Wild West shows where it became dramatized. Which I wouldn't say back then, it was probably more realistic. Annie Oakley was a hell of a shot. So those were real people that just started to do what the skills they've learned, they used it to make money off of it. So after, all that different stuff happened, I feel like it really, this idea of hunting clubs and the higher society started coming in, which I think started probably in England with
fox hunts
and stuff like that. That idea started coming to America, and I feel like it really was revolutionized with the time period of Theodore Roosevelt. So I listened to a book called The Naturalist, which was a autobiography, or auto is you do it yourself. It was probably, it was 100% a biography called The Naturalist. It is an amazing book about the life of Theodore Roosevelt. Read it. It was one of my favorite history books. So this idea of a naturalist is an expert in natural history. He was a ornithologist, a guy that studies birds. He did that as a kid. All this different stuff. He was a big hunter, and one of my favorite presidents because he was the foundation of conservation. He started Yellowstone,
the national park system,
all the different national park systems. So, but he also started the Boone and Crockett Club, which I think a lot of people that are listening to us are familiar with. which is
it'd be a system of, originally it was created to record and monitor the size of animals that were hunted or killed in an area. So like today you measure your rack of an animal, a whitetail or an elk,
the volume of
the total number of inches taken from certain measurements up and around the antler.
Which they have a new thing where they dip the antlers in water and then
by volume?
Yeah, measure the displacement. So it's a extremely accurate measurement of instead of estimating, because you're taking a measurement between each horn, but it may vary and stuff. I think that's the future of there's
water displacement.
Yeah, water displacement. You can't fake it. But go on.
Yeah, so originally it was created to monitor and track like the rises and falls of the quality of animals in a population. Yeah, so at first, like glance, the Boone and Crockett Club seems to be like a brag board where like you can go and say, oh, I shot a 170 inch or I shot a 180 inch. But really, there's no getting around the fact that a good population of animals, no matter if it's elk or whitetail or mule deer or anything that grows antlers, there's no getting around the fact that a healthy population is going to have bigger animals in it. And so that's essentially what this was focused around, was to track the population, and doing so by the largest males in the herd.
To put a little bit more context, at this time in America, a lot of the big game animals that we hunt were basically on the verge of extinction. Yeah. So they created these different foundations that were rooted in conservation, where they were concerned, they used data via, measurement of horns, but also when it came to bears, the measurement of their skull and stuff like that. So there's a lot. There's bad that goes along with Theodore. He wasn't perfect, but there is a lot of good.
Yep.
Along all this, throughout the beginning of America to where we're talking about now, there was always hunting gear catalogs. And I feel like a lot of people either read books about hunting and then got a lot of their information via these catalogs and stuff like that. But
and I think that's where we transfer, right? Like there was a whole generation of like the early hunters in America where this was their
if they could read, they read books about hunting.
Yeah. But this was where like the media for them changed into more similar of the media. If you're not watching this, I'm doing air quotes for us, right? Like originally they would have done these rendezvous and they would have done, like where they would have met up at trapping camps. But all of a sudden now that it's changing into catalogs and slightly further down magazines, you're going to
1887, the oldest hunting magazine in America.
Yeah.
Sports Afield.
Yeah.
So directly after, this is actually, that magazine came out before Theodore Roosevelt was president, I believe. If I'm thinking right, he was president in the early 1900s.
Sure. So
magazines start rolling into the picture is what we're getting at now.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where this big change happens. Like we're only 24, 25 years old, so our scope of what we consider old hunting media compared to new hunting media isn't as large. But at the same time, like this is where I would see that transfer into what we know as old hunting media. So
yeah, if you were to go to your grandpa's house and he's got some dusty books on the shelf and there's some old hunting magazines in there, that's where we're starting on this story now. So the transfer between the 18 and 1900s, the early 1900s, we're starting to get into more accessible media. The general population's becoming more educated. They're reading stuff like that. So there's, now we're talking about this weird in between where we're starting to phase from magazines. We're going to hit on magazines real quick, and then we're going to the first TV shows and stuff like that, which I'm not quite sure when television even came out, to be honest. But so there was these old hunting magazines, and now the populace could get information that was probably fairly accurate.
I would say so, yeah.
Non-bias magazines, stuff like that. I think probably we're starting to get into Fred Bear, stuff like that. What are you getting into?
When the magazine. Because that's what 1895.
Wow.
Because that's what I associate with a hunting magazine.
Yeah, so another magazine, Field and Stream, came out in 1895. So that's I don't know, almost 10 years after the first hunting magazine.
Yeah, but that's what I would say. As we move forward into this conversation, we're going to refer to old hunting media as what we're about to talk about, and not as much as those first hunters, because yes, they laid the foundation of what hunting is in America, but in this conversation,
it doesn't affect us today.
Yeah, the biggest change we're going to see is
magazines
when we saw these magazines start until now. So when we talk about old hunting media, some of the biggest things that come to my mind are magazines, VCR tapes. Some of you listeners might not even know what those are, but
game. I gave Cole the Pennsylvania State Game magazine from his birth year. So when I was at my grandpa's house and we were starting to get some of the old stuff once he passed away and my uncle passed away, we started inheriting some of the stuff from his house. And up in the top of the house, there were magazines. I think the oldest there was some comics and stuff like that from the 50s, but there was magazines from the 50s, 60s era. Wow. Old hunting magazines. My uncles were really into hunting and stuff like that, so a lot of that stuff was kept. It was pretty cool. So I was able to give Cole and Travis their birth year magazine for Pennsylvania State Game magazine. So,
those are super cool.
We really enjoy that stuff. And, I feel like magazines probably started out real good. And that's the whole concept that we're going to start getting into is like magazines were probably, a great source of information. And then eventually that information starts getting a little corrupted, and then the magazines might, turn towards advertising more and less about the quality of the content. But
yeah, I would have to say, looking at that Pennsylvania Game News magazine compared to like a Field and Stream magazine that I would have got when I was like 10, the advertising and the ads in the entirety of the magazine is at least 50% more. Like if you were to pick up a magazine,
back in the day.
Yeah, if you were to pick up a magazine if you can still find one in like Cabela's or whatever, you'd get 50% media, 50% advertising, and I feel like that's a
probably
big change
more
too.
Advertising if I had to guess.
Yeah.
It's pretty well.
Yeah.
That's what we're, trying to get into with this whole podcast is basically talking about like the quality of information versus the quantity or the way that information is provided to you. So, now we're getting into the transfer between magazines and TV shows and VHS, which I have it spelled wrong on here, tapes. So, some of these TV shows I haven't watched, so we're pretty young, but I'm sure maybe some of our audience have heard the American Sportsman. 1965 was one of the first American television series that pertained to hunting or fishing trips, outdoor recreation, stuff like that. Another one would be Buckmaster, started in 1988.
I would have to say that one rings a bell for me. I've definitely watched
something like that.
Watched a Buckmaster video at an old hunting camp or something.
So this is where the introduction of having home cameras start coming in. Home cameras, lighter weight cameras are getting more available to the masses in the mid 1900s. So more people are, can afford equipment and stuff like that, but I feel like the general population probably doesn't. So it's probably more along the lines of some like big TV show sort of. For example, in the American Sportsman, one of the actors or TV men was Bing Crosby, and he's a more famous person. So it wasn't like it was your average guy with a camera. Now we're getting into the time period where there's like, for us now with how easy it is having a cell phone in our pockets. Very weird. But back in the day, you couldn't have like a really nice camera to do some of these different TV shows or hunting shows.
Yeah, it would have been a big production and big cameras and stuff like that. But before we move into what comes next, what do you think some of the problems that were created with a generation of hunting media that was monopolized by
Definitely.
people that could afford it
money.
and people that were able to haul those big cameras onto big trips? What do you think problems with that would be?
So we didn't have the opportunity to watch any of this stuff, but if I had to guess, it was probably more about entertainment than it was about the quality of information. I'm sure it was, factual in a way, but I think it was probably more of that like homey, like TV show where you're like watching somebody do some sort of fishing trip or something like that, where they didn't really go into the tackle they were using or the different equipment. It was probably just more about the experience, if I had to guess. So it was probably entertaining, and especially when TV started coming out. And, honestly, I bet not a lot of people had television or color television too during these time periods. So, I think it probably was more for the masses that had more money.
Yeah. It's interesting because that brings into the idea that like today we're seeing hunting move closer to a pay to play style thing, right? Tags are getting more expensive. Outfitters are getting more expensive. Travel's getting more expensive. And it's starting to weed out these people on the lower end of what they can afford and out of hunting, because it's going to become so expensive. And it's interesting to see that like when hunting media first started, it also would have been something that people had to be able to afford to do.
I'm positive.
Yeah.
So now we're starting to jump into the self-filmed VHS tapes. When I think of going to hunting shops when I was a kid, there was this one down on 81 there, but I can't remember the name. I think they're still open, but it was a very old-timey type of hunting shop, and you'd go in there and they'd have a TV on and a pile of VHSs right next to it, and they'd be playing all these different hunting shows.
Yeah.
So we were very on the cusp of when VHS was popular. If I had to guess, it was probably 1970s to the 1990s. Which makes sense with when CD and stuff like that started coming out. So
I would have to say we grew up on like a very pinnacle time. I think we were born right around when this new age of hunting media started. Like you were able to go into the stores and see like what was filmed a couple years ago or like 10 years ago. And then as we get older and get more into hunting, you start to see these DVDs and the stuff that's coming with that new hunting media. So I think we were born in a very pinnacle time for the change in hunting media.
Yeah, so there was VHS tapes, like I'm sure some people that are listening have heard of Buck 1, Buck 2, all the different Buck series. There was Duckman, which would be Duck Dynasty and stuff like that.
That's how they got their start, was those VHS tapes.
Self-filmed basically VHS tapes, and that's how Duck Dynasty became what it was, is he started filming on VHS and releasing these VHS, and then everybody wanted his duck calls. So this is that the 70s, 80s, 90s was this pivotal moment where now media is becoming important for the hunting industry, where they could start making money via these videos. So this is that like pivotal moment where the good and bad that we're going to talk about starts to come from. So
yeah, I think that's what rolls us right into this new generation with the Outdoor Channel and the Pursuit Channel and things,
because they grew up watching stuff like that, and then now they're doing
they're like, we can apply this now to broadcasted TV, and that's what brings us into this new hunting media generation, right? It starts around like 1990, and it's changed a little bit over the years from 1990, but essentially it's still similar, right? People were able to record on their own for a little bit of a cheaper cost. They were able to, like you see, there's a lot of low budget recordings and videos on the Pursuit channel and the Outdoor channel.
We could produce higher quality videos that are still on Pursuit and Outdoor channel right now.
Yeah, but I think like that's definitely where you see the change, because these people can now afford film crews and they can go on these hunts on their own and things like that. So,
for example, I remember listening to a video or watching a video on YouTube talking about one of the channels that had a Pursuit or Outdoors channel. And basically, you had to have $100,000, and you could have a Pursuit or Outdoors channel TV show. So that's pretty manageable.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of change, but if that's what you're going to invest your time into, if that's your business,
that's like half a house for people back in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So, if they were making a decent living and, or had, well, honestly, it was a lot of older people. So if I had to guess, it was a lot of people that were close to retirement or retired. So they have a little cushion. They want to pursue this outdoor lifestyle, and they take some of their retirement, and they get a TV show. And is that a good thing? Probably not.
We'll address that at the end. So like when we talk about new hunting media, it starts with the Pursuit channel and the Outdoor channel, but now like we are in the thick of it today. We are in a generation where anything is available to you. So like we have short form media where either if you watch it on Facebook Reels or YouTube Reels or TikTok, and like the even newer generation has Snapchat and Snapchat stories and how you can post what you're doing in real time to those things. And then we have Instagram, which is an interesting one, because previously, if you wanted to share your grip and grins or your pictures from a field, you would go down to the sporting goods store in town and you'd pin it up on the board right inside the door. I think that was one of my favorite things growing up, was walking in and seeing those. But now all you got to do is take the picture on your phone and post it for everybody to see. So it's
which is the convenience factor there is great, but we'll get into it more at the end. But the community that was lost from some of the social media is definitely unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that brings us also into like long format videos like YouTube. There's some more niche things like MOTV, My Outdoor TV. People can post their series of hunting videos
different
there.
Hunting apps, basically.
Yeah. So like the old way would have been that expensive production. It would have been something more distant, almost more like celebrity too. Like there were a lot more celebrities in hunting media in that old version. But in the new way, like everybody has a camera that can shoot. Most people have a 4K camera in their pocket. Their phones can shoot 4K. And so all of a sudden these people can record their experiences in the outdoors and post it, whether that be good or bad. So it creates a loss of the community for like if you wanted to enjoy hunting media, you would have had to search it out. But now with all the algorithms and stuff like that, people who are not having the hunting community in their best interest, whether it be poaching or questionable activities, like people who just aren't the poster boy for outdoors and people, hunters, fishermen, things like that. All of a sudden, those people can be pitched to people who aren't looking for that, if that makes sense. Previously, you would have had to search out the hunting media, but now people who aren't and people who are similar to anti-hunters or anti-hunters can all of a sudden be served up this potentially distasteful stuff from the hunting media. So that's one of the problems I see with the new hunting media is people aren't careful enough about what they're putting out there on the internet, and they're not thinking about the impact that it can have on hunters and fishermen and things like that. So it creates better opportunities at the same time though too, because I don't know where you're listening to this from today, but it's obviously not right here in the room with us. And so it allows hunters and fishermen and outdoorsmen to be connected and be involved in this bigger community and in an easier way too, right? We're right in your pocket, or we're right on your computer, or right on your TV, and it was a lot easier for you to find this media today. So there's definitely pros and cons. Whether the pros outweigh the cons, I think for now they do, and I think it's great for that long format style of video.
Yeah, I just want to hit on it real quick. The introduction of YouTube has been great because the expensive TV productions often felt really not in the moment. It was very, you did an interview, then the buck started coming out, and then it goes to him in the tree stand and has, it felt very scripted. For me, growing up as a young kid, it was nice because that was the only form of hunting I was able to watch was on Pursuit or the Outdoors channel. So at least I had something to watch, but I felt like it did skew my sense of reality where all these guys are getting huge animals, and I felt like it created a generation that like was more focused on getting bigger trophy animals rather than just enjoying hunting. And that's where I disagree with TV is like that, it was very
disconnected.
Disconnected and unobtainable. So that's why I like how things are moving forward, where we have YouTube where anybody could do it. People like the hunting public that just do it to hunt rather than the trophies, stuff like that.
I think also the knowledge that can be gained from this new hunting media at the same time, especially in long format videos. Like before, like you said, maybe in the middle of it, they'll be like, and I killed this buck using tinks, or I rattled him in with this night and hail. And like maybe they would give you an example of how they did it. But now you can watch these videos like
purely focused on rattling, purely focused on habitat.
And like you mentioned with the hunting public before, in their videos, you can watch a full length hunting video where in it they will do overlays of onyx and show how they stalked the elk or where they called the turkey from. And or the knowledge they produce in a long format is
they
really
don't edit out the boring stuff, which most people want because it's the important stuff. If they're sitting there calling, a big TV show might show a second of calling and then go straight to the bucks coming in. So what happened between the calling and the buck maybe be 4 hours has been cut out. And then when you go hunting, you rattle, you're like, all right, it's coming.
The TV said it should be here in 20 seconds.
It's coming. Obviously they have that's what I think's wrong with TV. I don't have a subscription to a cable TV or satellite TV. I watch YouTube. And it's great. I love it.
There's definitely things to gain over this new form of media.
Yeah, I did want to hit on too was the quality of information. There's a lot more information, that's for sure. I think if you look up the statistics, there's like thousands of videos that get posted to YouTube daily. The content, the availability of it is crazy, but I think there's, through the algorithms, they could be good and bad, but I think it tends to weed out the bad.
If
you're doing bad things or
giving false information.
I think people are starting to be able to see through that and they don't listen to that content or watch it, and then it sort of falls off the, they might get a couple, however many views in the beginning, but then I think it starts to drop off. And that's where you could look up channels that have a high volume of subscribers and pretty much trust them. There's a lot of trust that goes on with, YouTube and stuff like that. But for the most part, if they're honest and you could, the long format podcast, you could really learn a lot about a person. So
I think also like as media has developed, people have too, right? Just because prior, like you didn't have that many options of people to listen to, so you had to trust them. But now all of a sudden, there's this new way where everybody has a voice, but people are learning how to be able to read those good voices and understand who actually knows what they're talking about and who is just trying to. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a skill that people have developed as media has also developed.
Yeah, so now we have a few questions to round out the video. One of them is, where do we see hunting media heading in the next 20 years? And I'll hit on this first because I put some information below this point here. But I wanted to hit on the topic of, which I'm coining this term right now, so if anybody else takes it, please credit me. But I'm sure everybody that has a good sense of music has heard of bro country, where it's like, not to hate on anybody, we don't want to hate, but there are some
most new country.
Yeah, if you listen to the radio, you know what I'm talking about. There's not the Waylon Jennings anymore. So this bro country is basically, I'll jump into the bro hunters. I don't want to hate on Elk Shape or Cam Haines or Joe Rogan or anything like that. I'm huge fans of all three of those people. Great people, but I think they naturally draw in these bro country guys, these bro hunters that are maybe they listen to Joe Rogan, they think he's great and stuff like that. They're all focused on doing a lot of hard work, and I'm gonna put 35 pounds of rocks in my backpack and run up a hill, and they don't really know a lot about hunting.
The problem there lays within the hard work over the knowledge. Yeah. Like I would say Elk Shape and Cam Haines fall into a different category than Joe Rogan because they both have an incredible knowledge of the outdoors through the way they grew up. But Joe Rogan pushes slightly more of
newer to hunt.
Yeah.
But I'm not hating on these guys. I literally am subscribed to them. I've listened to Cam Haines, I think two of his books now. I watch a lot of Elk Shape. I listen to Joe Rogan all the time. I'm not hating on those people. I'm hating on the specific 1% that listen to them that they just are naturally drawn to.
I'm following you now.
So people, I'm talking about the people that are more concerned with views, more concerned with getting, the big ones. There's recent stories where this one somewhat popular Instagram, YouTube guy, there was a woman that shot a mule deer. They were tracking that mule deer. This guy ends up shooting the mule deer as well after the fact. And they get together and they're tracking this mule deer, and he runs ahead and gets the mule deer and basically steals it from this woman. So I'm talking about those people, the bad actors that just ruin it for everybody else. The kids with that floppy haircut that are out at you show up to a duck hole early in the morning. You're there first, and these kids come in with their crazy fancy Sitka and, $20,000 shotguns or whatever. Yeah. And they're like, get out of my hole. Yeah. People that are out there making drama for views.
I would say it hasn't changed. Like, these people have always existed, but now all of a sudden they have the ability to have a voice.
So when we go back to the question, where do we see hunting media going in the next 20 years? I'm concerned about those people that are pushing these boundaries to create, that's the problem with YouTube is like everybody thinks they're this like popular person now just because they have a camera. So, but there's these people out there that are leading the way, and there's the underdogs. So the people leading the way that I feel like in the YouTube hunting media space would be Go Hunt and Meat Eater. And I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that, except for Go Hunt, when you first introduced me to it, I've never heard about it before. So maybe some people don't hear about them now, but they create amazing content. And I'm sure a lot of you have listened to Meat Eater podcasts and stuff like that. They almost feel like they have a monopoly over the hunting industry.
Absolutely.
They just pound out these amazing podcasts and videos and stuff, but they're setting a pretty good example, like with the different the amount of conservation that they're doing, the quality of videos that like Go Hunt produces. They're really, where I see the good would be with Go Hunt and Meat Eater, and also the underdogs, the hunting public. Some of those slightly smaller channels like Chris B, the hunting public. Elk shape sort of smaller.
Yeah.
I feel like they're the underdogs that, are setting really good examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say over the next 20 years, I think, not to gloss over the negatives, but I think those people, those bro hunters, I don't want to say that they're not going to be a concern, because they definitely will be, because anybody who goes afield with potential to gain views by being a bad example definitely needs to be addressed. But I think
naturally people are like not attracted to that.
correct. Yeah, I think
but people do love drama.
Yes.
That's the only unfortunate
yes,
part.
and it's so much easier to get now than before. But I think over the next 20 years, I think we're generally headed in the right direction. I think with everybody having a voice, you can see the conservation efforts. You can see how many people are generally concerned about the outdoors and furthering the next generation of hunters and furthering the populations of animals. And I think that's great.
Yeah, I think I could have a more narcissistic view, because we grew up
Narcissistic or pessimistic?
narcissistic.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately. Because we grew up in a very old-timey way. And I think we're just, we're afraid of that future going the wrong way. Like I idolize like Theodore Roosevelt and those old hunting clubs where it was very sophisticated gentlemen, and they cared about what's going on, so much so that they've left hundreds of millions of acres left for the following generations, where I feel like those type of strong men are less and less.
Yep.
So I am a little bit narcissistic towards the future, because it's that balance between like good and evil and stuff like that. And I, unfortunately, I wish I could be more pessimistic, and hopefully it does go in the right way. But
I would have to say I think to a fault have an optimistic point of view, where I can see
not pessimistic. I hope to be more optimistic towards the future.
Yeah, I would say that I'm to a fault optimistic, and where I can see all the good that could happen from here and not so much worry about the bad, because the bad will be sorted out. But I think taking both into account, I still think an optimistic point of view moving forward tends to lead out just a little bit, because of these companies like we see, like Go Hunt and Meat Eater and the hunting public, who take not only their place of fame, however you want to use that word, to forward themselves, but instead they turn around and they put it back into the places and the animals that they enjoy. People like, I saw Go Hunt this week went out and did a sheep study with Nevada Game and Fish. Meat Eater has the thing. Meat Eater did some wolf stuff, and they have the Land Access Initiative, where they take a big percentage of things that they
profits
that they make. Yeah, and the hunting public, I just saw in their newest video, they're doing a national public lands cleanup day, where they take their followers from all across the country, and they do in-person and remote public land cleanup. And I think the optimistic point of view there is that these people who are gaining fame through this new media are using it for good. Yeah.
So another question would be, is it changing for the better? So I feel like we sort of touched on that
I think
just
so.
now.
And so I guess we wrap it up with, how do we make sure to keep it going down the right path?
Yeah.
We everybody has a voice nowadays, and I think we all just need to take that voice and use it to point hunting media in the right direction. You gotta point out those bad actors, and you gotta call them out, and you have to make sure that voice doesn't continue, because it can do a lot of damage to the hunting community.
Yeah, often when you think of the good things and bad things, like it seems like the bad things tend to stand out more, and not a lot of people focus on the good. And that's, I guess, what you were talking about just now. But I think just to make sure that things move in the right direction, one thing that I feel like we're missing, the whole goal of this podcast was to reflect on the last 150 years. And if we look back on that 150 years and pick the good things out, I feel like there once was a time where the community around hunting was larger. Not that it's not bigger today. I'm sure there's more hunters today for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But more hunters that work together. Like fortunately, it seems like with the Outdoor Insiders, a hunting shop that came to our area that's new. They have a 3D range, indoor and outdoor. It seems they're starting to create this community effort. I think with the push towards homeschooling, everybody's getting pretty fed up of where America's headed today. And I think with the push for homeschooling and stuff like that, it's going to create a more need for creating communities. And that's where like people like us, I'm sure there's 100,000 people just like us that wanted to start a hunting YouTube channel and stuff like that are doing it in their own communities. And it's about at least making an effort, and that's why we're here today, is we're trying to make an effort to create a local community, because ideally we would love to have just a handful of followers to come help us clean up or do some sort of conservation initiative. So ideally we're here trying to create a community to have access to accurate and reliable information, and we're just trying to create that conservation effort with our YouTube channel.
I would say, just to wrap it up, is that if we want to make sure to point hunting media in the right direction over the next 20 years and beyond, it starts with you, right? Like, everybody has a voice now. Just make sure you're using your voice to build up and not to break down.
Right on.
All right, guys, thanks for tuning in today to Beyond the Barrier. If you haven't listened to our previous episodes, head back, listen to our first couple. We have some great ones out there, some great stories, some great tips and tricks. Head over to our YouTube, subscribe there so you can check out some of these great videos we have coming up here this spring, and we'll catch you on the next one.
All right.